Welcome back.
Welcome back to Broadscast. It's seriously, I think, one of the most important episodes we've ever done.
I'm very quietly getting my own questions answered.
I know.
So
I'm already asking Susan when I can get my appointment.
Hey, before we continue, I just want to very quickly make sure that we say an extra thank you to Stark Social, who is our web designer. He's our web guru.
And our sponsor.
Yes, our sponsor. So I just thank you so much for the team at Stark Social for making us be so smart here.
They're a social marketing firm with an emphasis on small business, startups, and nonprofit organizations with budgets of all shapes and sizes.
And they're our biggest fan and our statistician.
And they're always tweeting for us. So, okay, let's get to the next. Denisha Danielle, she is a financial expert and host of Home Free on Fox. Denisha, are you with us?
I am.
Good morning. And my girl crush, everybody already knows. So
the feeling is mutual.
Yes, I have to mention that every single time we have you on. So you are probably the smartest person with money I've ever known. So
wait, if she didn't have money, would she be stupid?
No, I said smartest with money.
Yeah, I know. I'm just checking.
Oh, my goodness, Kim, awkward. So, Denisha, tell us, there are, we're talking about estate plans, we're talking about life insurance in a little bit, but what do people need to have? Give us, dumb us down here for a second. What are we all doing wrong, and what steps can we take, simple steps today to make it right?
Well, I think in general, and this applies really to everybody, but in general, I think we don't think about tragedy, we don't think about death, we don't make plans for bad things to happen, accidents, etc. I mean, most of us have car insurance, but many of us don't have life insurance. And some people, when you have children and a family, they get devastated when something unexpected happens or an illness happens. And it's not just emotionally and physical devastation. It can lead to financial devastation, which lasts for generations. So that type of thing is, something to really, really take into consideration. And it happens. It's as sad as it is, and it's so crazy that you asked me to do it this week, is because I was actually updating my living trust, and for some reason I always do it at the end of September. I don't know why, but it's a very sombering thought to think about your own death or the death of loved ones.
Right.
But it is something that really needs to be taken seriously. I've seen, especially as in real estate sales, I've seen people completely devastated by unexpected accidents and death and traumas.
That's the thing. We all think, not me, but at the same time, Kim lost her brother at a young age. My mom was 39 when she died. We see every day. I saw a car accident of a Facebook friend, her daughter who's 21. It happens. And so it ends up, you see all these GoFundMe pages, and you can't help but want to help these families who are in, and this isn't about, them specifically, but are we living in a time where we're just kind of flying by the seat of our pants and not preparing ourselves? Is this a different generation from past, or have we always been this way?
I wish I could say it was. I really don't think so, and I'm so sorry to hear about your mom. But it also happened to me. My daughter's father was 31 when he was diagnosed with cancer and died 4 months later. Wow. My daughter was only 10 weeks old, so it happened to me. I was very, very young at the time, so definitely didn't have life insurance in place or any kind of plan. He gratefully did, which actually saved my daughter and I a ton of grief, aside from the grief that we were experiencing. Mm-hmm. But I would say that the majority of people, I actually have a client who was an attorney, and he was 60 years old, and we were in escrow, and his loan docs were delivered to him on a Friday. I called him Monday morning. He had died over the weekend.
Oh, my God.
Of a heart attack. His family was, completely devastated. And this was a guy who was responsible. He was an attorney. He knows. He knows what needs to be done. I think that all of us have some sense of immortality. Mm-hmm. And we know that we're going to die in theory, but we don't make plans for it. And that is the worst thing you could do, especially when you have a family and dependents.
Well,
and an estate.
Yeah, and I think Susan Christopher, who's in the studio with us, she mentioned that earlier. It's a hard conversation to have. It's mm-hmm. uncomfortable and it's awkward, and you have to plan ahead and you have to think about every step of the way. And I think that people have a real hard time with forecasting.
Correct.
Trauma. Right.
There's one thing that she said that I did not agree with, because I got a bit of it. I actually have different people that would take care of my daughter versus my finances. And that's because these are their fortes. And I also kind of like a system, in my mind, of a little bit of checks and balances. Unless you have somebody in your life that is excellent with money, excellent with your kids, knows all of your wishes for your children and how you would make decisions, which would be completely a blessing. I really don't think it should be the same person. I've also seen in my business people really take advantage of being the trustee of an estate.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And that can be financially devastating. I have a family member who inherited a lot of money at a very early age and has nothing to show for it. None of that money actually even got to them.
I know somebody at the opposite side, too, who is the trustee, and the burden that she's carried over the past, I mean, it's taken years to, and this is, 2 elderly parents who've passed away, and the burden that she still carries, like separating things and going through it's, I mean, like Susan was saying, maybe it's a personal thing, too, in that, maybe that person needs to just focus there. Or maybe,
I mean, that's always something to consider. I have co-trustees.
Mm-hmm. Right. That's what I have too.
I mean, it is a huge responsibility to ask somebody to take over your life in the event of your death. And usually this is somebody close to you, so they would have their own grief and maybe families to take care of themselves. So it is a very, very serious consideration.
Right. Yeah, and so, I think just to jump in there a little bit, and I totally agree, and I tried to say that it's, everybody has a different opinion on that. Mm-hmm. I do want to just point out that there's a difference between the executor and the trustee. Mm-hmm. So the executor is the person who's doing all of the administrative stuff associated with the person's death, and I actually have found in my experience that is the most burdensome.
Right.
That's the person who has to constantly produce the death certificate, who has to constantly make those phone calls and go to the banks, and that is a very, very burdensome process.
Right, that's what I was thinking.
The trustee of the finances is the executor putting all of that into the accounts for the trust.
I see.
And then the trustee is just managing that money going forward
the
for
checks
the student.
and making sure that everything's being paid.
Yeah.
And
So
in my case, I own some real estate, and the trustee would probably have the biggest job because it wouldn't, it's hands-on.
Right.
Yeah.
But and when we talk about some of the average, people around the country, should they have life insurance? Should they have money in the bank? Or is it just put it all in life insurance and then you don't have to worry about it currently? No,
I would say I'm not a fan of the life insurance that converts into money. I'm more of a fan of term life insurance. I actually did buy a whole life insurance plan before, but it's really a very expensive savings plan.
Right.
And there's also just a general live in the now thing that we have to get away from, because it's not even just in the event of a tragedy that strikes, but at some point all of us are going to get older, and we're going to not be able to work as much, and we have to have made plans for that. So sometimes people it's not even just in the event of a tragedy, but they're not even planning for their own future investing-wise.
Right.
Kim Kiyosaki, who's Rich Kiyosaki's wife, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, she tweeted something that completely blew me away. She said, think investing is risky. Risky is becoming one of 64% of women over the age of 46 who are impoverished because they did not invest.
Right.
64%.
Wow. So what are some if somebody has no idea, they have a few bucks in the bank and they're looking to invest and maybe start a future, what would you suggest?
Well, few bucks, save it. You need to have a rainy day savings for sure. Everybody does. I mean, that's not even just in case of a tragedy. That's in case of a car problem, a car accident. So, and most people have one or just a few bank accounts, and they spend, they look at what's in their bank account as if that's the money they have to spend. So I
have no idea what you mean.
Well, I mean, and I say this not from a place of I haven't been there. This is exactly what I had to do to myself. And I actually created savings accounts and had automatic transfers come up and not look at those savings accounts. Those are not linked to my online account. So when I log in, I don't even see what's in the savings account. So I don't think it's extra money I have.
Right.
And how much do you suggest we have in savings?
Having something like that just automatically takes the money away.
Mm-hmm. And how much?
So if you have a few bucks, that's where I would start.
Okay, so how much should we have in savings?
Most people recommend 6 months. I would say at the very least, and depending on your age, 3 months.
Okay.
Worth of expenses, and that's like your basic living expenses, your home, car, food, utilities, like that, like something like that covers in the event that you lost your job or something like that you would have at least 3 months saved.
We talked and I think you may have just touched on it, somebody did, about insurance. And, most adults, we plan ahead for our own demise in terms of we have life insurance plans, some of us, for ourselves. What do either of you or Susan, Denisha, think about life insurance for children? I know that's a lot of people don't know if you're supposed to have plans for your children or what you should do.
If you're watching Disney Channel for more than 10 minutes, you see a commercial for the Gerber life insurance, and I'm like, I don't understand, why are we? And even when I did my own life insurance, they were saying, oh well, these are the amounts if you wanted to do it for the kids. Like, what is the purpose, and should we be looking into that?
Right, and I totally agree. And a life insurance is really to account for the loss of income that would happen in the event of a death. Mm-hmm. Your child is not producing income for your home, hopefully. Unless
I have a huge problem with that, but you're right.
I really cannot think of a parent who is like, okay, well, my child has passed, but can't wait to cash in that policy. So, to me, I think it's a little strange. I don't think it's a good use of finances. And because it's not really going to cover anything except for funeral expenses. And if you're really concerned about that, you can get that kind of insurance. But I don't think that's something that it would even be any kind of use of good money.
Yeah, I was actually going to say the same thing. My only caveat, and she just mentioned it, would be burial expenses, funeral expenses, which, like for my family in my current financial situation, that would actually be a short-term burden in addition to the grief of losing a child. How am I going to pay? And then there goes the GoFundMe page, right?
Right,
so,
exactly.
Like my husband has a very low-cost option through work for the children, and so we have a very, very low insurance policy on them, only to cover funeral expenses. But you shouldn't be trying to make money off of your kids' death.
No. But I think there are a lot of people who, if God forbid something happened to their child, not only are there expenses, but they have to be back at work in 3 days. I mean, if they don't work, they don't get paid, and then it's a huge, it could be a huge burden. I mean, we don't like to think about something happening to a child, but I mean, do you feel like if we have that 3 months in the savings, then maybe it could kind of help out with that in lieu of the insurance for kids?
I mean, I hate to be statistical about this, but of the traumas and tragedies that happen, it's usually not that the financial devastation doesn't come from the trauma of losing a child.
Right.
I personally, now if you weren't able to go back to work and you had to go on disability for whatever reason, and there are bereavement programs at in many jobs and occupations. So I don't know if that would be. I mean, I still would not really recommend that.
Well, and also just as an aside, if your loved one has been killed in a violent crime and there's district attorney and law enforcement are involved, there is money that comes through the state to pay for funeral expenses.
Correct.
If you recover funds, you have
Security.
to.
I mean, in the event that your husband or wife is, or even just a father of your child, you don't necessarily have to be married, father or mother. If something happened to them and they've been paying into Social Security, there is a death benefit that comes until the child's 18 years old.
Right.
Oh, okay.
A lot of people don't know about that.
Yeah, see, I mean, that's the thing. I think people just automatically assume they'll need to come up with certain financial...
Well, don't you ever see those shows that they say, put your Social Security number in here and see if you have money owed to you? Because people don't know that there are all these programs out there that I mean, I think I received like a penny one time. But, there's all these government programs that you pay into that you don't know about until, God forbid, something happens.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So, okay. So say we have 3 months in our savings, and now we've got a few more dollars, and we want to invest. Now, what do we do?
Well, then you call me.
And look, we did.
I mean, for me, real estate changed my life. It's to me, it's a very hands-on investment. I don't really love investing in the stock market, even though I have some investments there. To me, I can kick the tires on real estate. I can, determine how much rent is going to be by doing kind of a little simple rent survey. And when you even start small, even a duplex or a triplex or a small home, if you already own your own home, obviously, or as I recommend, if you can, buy a fourplex and live in it and rent out the other 3 units. That to me is the smartest way to start as both a homeowner and a landlord. But that's really where I would start. And the financing is the same. So if you can afford a home, you can also afford a fourplex. They just have to rerun the numbers for you. And a lot of people don't know that.
So question for you, Denisha. You mentioned earlier that you had a family member that inherited a large sum of money and now they have nothing to show for it. So my question, Susan, when you designate money to your children, do you suggest that it should be on a payment plan, that it should be, X amount of dollars every year when you hit a certain age, or what do you think some of the controls should be over gifting money to children?
Well, most of my clients choose to, the buzzwords in a trust are usually health, education, and welfare. And so there's a lot of discretion there, which goes back to Denisha's point about making sure it's someone you trust with finances and that's good with finances. And that, checks and balances there. But once they turn 18, it becomes a question of what you feel comfortable with. I have one client who chose not to give their child any money until they graduated from college because they were so intent on making sure that their child went all the way through college. I have some who continue with that health, education, and welfare through the age of 25, and then at 25 they get some of the money, and again at 30. It really comes down to where you feel like you were as a kid, how mature you think you are, or when do you want your kids to have sort of a windfall of money, assuming there's some of that money left.
But can you still control it? Like Denisha, you were saying that person, even if it's not a child, or maybe it's the estate person, the trustee, can you dictate how much money that they have access to at a time, and not the whole lump sum?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. You can work out some sort of monthly stipend that they would have to help raise their student. I mean, that gets a little bit more complex, I think, when you look at what money is worth down the line, if you set a specific monetary amount, because that amount might not be worth as much in
and then
5 or 10 years, depending on,
That makes sense.
And can it be changed, Jackie's making hand gestures really fast. So I know from mine, I have it set up that my son keeps getting money until in his early 30s, I think. Can that be changed by the trustee at some point if they feel like that the person is more responsible or in a situation where they may need it?
Yeah, you just have to be specific about how much discretion your trustee has.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
And honestly, that's where I think in the case of my friend where they went wrong, because the trustee had so much discretion that they were able to use it for expenses that at their discretionary proposal, and then the money was gone, and they had the freedom to invest, and they bought 9 million shares of a coffee company that went nowhere.
Right. Wow.
Yeah.
So I really in my trust my number one goal is that my children are taken care of, and that the best decisions possible are made. And so I really kind of laid mine out, and I wanted to make sure that there is discretionary, but not complete freedom.
Right. So, Denisha, what would be a resource for? I mean, you talk about investing in real estate, and that's always been. And I've known you for years, and you've always been that's your go-to. Where would be a good resource for people if they wanted to maybe dip their toe in the real estate water? Do they? Is there a place that they can go to find out, or just talk to a real estate agent, or talk to you, or talk to
You know what? There's some books. I would talk to somebody, and I wouldn't talk to anybody in real estate. I would talk to somebody who's an investor, because a lot of people can say, "Oh, what they sold somebody," but until you've really owned, invested, bought, and sold property, had bad experiences, it's like almost kind of theoretical instead of hands-on.
Right.
And so I would talk to somebody, if you know somebody who's an investor, absolutely start there. and they can probably direct you to a great real estate person or give you some advice in terms of what you want to do. But if you know somebody who's, a real estate agent that is also an investor, that's probably the best person.
Well, then I'm going to be calling you. So, Denise, thank you so much for joining us again.
Thank you.
And congratulations on the recent wedding and the family and
your show.
All of it and your show. I know. It's like, everything you touch turns to gold.
Oh, thank you.
All right. Thanks so much for joining us.
I always appreciate being on here.
Okay. Have a good day. And we will be right back with Broadscast.
Welcome back. Jackie, you still have your headphones on. Do you want to? You look so pretty.
Well, I was ready for a call, 661-298-5487. If you have a question for Susan Christopher, please feel free to call us, 661-298-5487. So a couple more things. This show is flying by, and I'm just really happy that thank you, Kim, for finally allowing me to do it.
Yes, I am the trustee of the show, apparently.
Yes. Mm-hmm. So Kim was just saying during the break, though, that when your brother died, you had somebody go to the funeral home with you.
Yeah, with my dad and I, to make sure that we didn't make any rash decisions in terms of buying the most expensive, the most cushioned, the most extravagant plot from my brother, because you're in that moment of just, they have to have the best. And I mean, we could have really been taken advantage of financially, and thankfully we weren't, because we had someone of sound mind. So I would strongly urge, and I think that's what you were saying.
That's a brilliant idea.
Yeah. So you wanted to talk about health insurance?
No, I wanted to talk about power of attorney.
That's right. Okay, sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of people, every time I go to the doctor, and I've had several surgeries, and they're like, do you have a power of attorney? And I'm like, no, just ask my husband what to do. I don't.
Yeah.
I don't. So tell us what that is and why we should have it or not.
So there are two different kinds of power of attorney, and I would say the most important kind is the healthcare power of attorney. Mm-hmm. And usually in the same document, people do or attach to it a healthcare directive. Mm-hmm. So healthcare power of attorney is the person who can make those decisions for you. If you're under anesthesia and something changes and the doctor needs permission to do some other treatment, or, you're in a car accident and somebody needs to make that decision of how to handle things, having those with an alternate in case, I don't know, someone's too distraught to make a good decision, or they can't get there fast enough, or whatever. So having a person in place to be your power of attorney for healthcare decisions, and to talk with insurance agents, because sometimes you need someone to call. It frustrates me so much, but everyone I hear going through these major healthcare traumas with themselves or someone in their family, and they're still having to go through the whole, getting the referrals and talking to the doctors and going through that whole healthcare nightmare. And sometimes they won't talk to even your spouse. And so you need to have a healthcare power of attorney in place so that you can fax that off to them and go, look, I've got legal ability to talk to you, because it's all private. It's all protected by HIPAA. So some doctors won't even talk to your spouse in certain situations without them having that signed document saying that that you have permission to talk about those things. Because they're trying to protect your privacy.
I thought this was more like, when it comes time to pull the plug, so who makes the choice?
That's the healthcare directive.
My husband would do it today if he could.
So, and that goes back to one of those really difficult, painful conversations to have, but it's so helpful, because if you're in that moment and you have to make a decision, do I pull the plug or not? I know there's no brain activity. I know that her heart's not functioning, but she's still breathing because she's hooked up to machines, and I can't bear to pull the plug. But you've already said, if two doctors tell you I'm not coming back, please pull the plug. You don't need to live like that. Then it's in place. You've made that decision. Do you want pain medication, even if it might speed your death? Think about that.
And these are all things that are done outside of the trust, or is this stuff that gets added into the trust?
That's all separate from your trust. Okay. So it's the healthcare power of attorney, healthcare directive. That's usually one document. Some people have it as two separate documents, but you want those two things. And then a regular durable power of attorney is just having someone in place that can do business things for you. Go pick up your mail from a P.O. box, or do something with the bank if you're temporarily unable to do it.
And again, are those people different than who you're the trustee should be, or the executor? Like, are these 5 different people that I'm going to have to turn my whole life over to?
It all goes back down to personal decision. I have some clients who have the same person for everything. If someone's taking your kids and there's been a major trauma and this wasn't expected, that could be a lot of burden for the guardians of your kids to take on. So you may want to consider having someone else be handling anything having to do with administrative work or finances. The healthcare directive piece is usually going to be, most of these documents, if you're married, it's going to be your spouse first, and then an alternate if they're not able to make that decision or they were with you or whatever.
Right.
So if someone's listening to the show right now and they're like, oh my gosh, this is so much information, I don't even know where to start, where would you tell them to start?
Well,
if they have none of these things, if they have nothing, they're like
you
Jackie.
mean besides going to my website?
I'm kidding.
I have life insurance.
I'm kidding. If you're beige,
I always say I'm worth more to my husband dead than alive, but that's okay.
Like, where do you encourage people to start if to break it down?
Well, I guess there's a couple different ways to answer that question, but go talk to an attorney. It's not expensive. Usually the first walk in the door for estate planning attorneys won't cost you anything. Right. Go have that conversation. I've got a website. You can contact me. I'm happy to have
What is your website?
It's willsandtrusthelp.org. I'm
That's
happy.
very catchy.
My husband said I'm a .org kind of person, so it just is what it is. I'm happy to have those conversations with somebody. Find someone who knows what they're talking about and help you start to understand what is an executor, what's a trustee, what do you have in place, and what are the right documents for you to have in place. I mean, the first thing I would say everyone right now should just go out and do, and you can do on your own without any help really, is that healthcare power of attorney. Mm-hmm. Have someone in place that can make those decisions for you.
And then also the guardianship of the kids.
The guardianship, I'm super passionate about that. Please make sure you have a will in place that sets forth who your guardians will be.
And make sure, I would imagine that you've talked to those people about whether or not they want your kids.
Thank you for pointing that out. Thank you for pointing that out. I've actually had people tell me that they were contacted by an attorney and had absolutely no idea that they were going to be executor or, God forbid, guardians.
Right.
Please have that conversation with your guardians.
But there are a lot of conversations like, what your wishes are if something is to happen, right? Because do you see a lot of that where somebody wants to be cremated and they want a big burial, wake, the whole...
Yeah, I think it goes back to a lot of communication. So even once you have all that paperwork in place, keep having those conversations with people. For instance, hey, my parents live overseas. It's really important to me, even though that my kids are going to stay here and be with these people, that they're still in contact with my family in Germany or what have you. Right. So having those conversations with your guardian so that they understand where you're at is super important. Having those conversations with your family. What do you want your funeral to look like? Do you want to be buried or cremated? Kim was pointing that out. It can be really painful when you don't know, and you have to feel like you want to honor the person you love so much, and you have no idea what they want.
And I also, in terms of communication, I remember when I was raised by my dad, and I remember when my dad came into my room with my brother and I and said, "Where do you want to live if something happens to me?" And I remember thinking, "What? Why would something happen to you?" And I remember we had a whole conversation about where we felt most comfortable and what family member we felt we could live with. And I remember feeling really empowered by my dad including me in that conversation. So I don't know if you have any thoughts about that and when it's appropriate or if you have that dialogue.
I love that conversation. I think we did it with our children. We had that conversation with
teenagers.
them. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it probably depends on their age. Mm-hmm. And I think if you're going to ask that question, make sure you're willing to listen to their answer. Right. Because if you're not actually going to do what they've said, then that causes a whole nother issue. And my parents did ask me and then did like the exact opposite of what I said. Yeah. So I'm not sure that's a great, healthy process. If you're not going to actually listen to what your kids say, then I would probably just tell them what's going to be happening, maybe if they're older.
And just as, again, drawing it back to my life, my best friend, I'm getting her children. And so that was a hard conversation for her to have with her family because she's got siblings and parents. Mm-hmm. And
well, you would get her children.
Yeah.
If something happened.
Yeah. If something were to happen to she and her husband, that I'm the designee. Right. So all the kids know that my kid's going to her and her kids are going to, so it's like a running joke with us. Like, when you die, we're going to go to Disneyland. Like, we're going to be at, like, and so it's like, we're all very, we're all very open about it. But that was awkward in the beginning when her family, you know,
but
when
it's
she
healthy in the long run, right?
Yeah,
Do you all
yeah.
feel so much more comfortable with that conversation?
Yeah, the boundaries
now
are clear and the
because-
expectations are clear, but it's hard. I mean, I think
it
that's
is hard.
you know, the
Yeah.
communication element is important.
Yeah.
So if we go back to life insurance for a second, what, you know, when somebody needs to pay for the expenses of a funeral, or, I mean, does the life insurance come quickly that you can pay for that stuff, or do they kind of defer the cost at the, you know, for the funeral services until you have that money in place?
You know,
happen to know?
I think it depends on the situation. Some insurance companies love to take their time on things like
Right.
that. And sometimes if you can produce the certificate right away, they'll have it out to you by the end of the month. I do think it just
But it's
depends.
best to pay for it in advance,
Usually,
just so that
funeral
isn't-
homes do take payment plans. I know that's weird
They
to
do.
say, but usually you don't have to pay cash the minute you walk in. You just will have a debt owing as the time goes on.
Right.
So.
Well, I mean, having you here, thank you so much.
Thanks
Your
for having
expertise
me.
is so important. So tell us the website again.
Willsandtrustshelp.org.
willsandtrustshelp.org.
Right.
So Susan, Christopher, I'm going to go to the website right now and schedule an appointment.
Thank you guys so much. I'm
Thank
excited
you.
you guys are having this conversation.
Us too. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Broadscast, and we will see you next week.